Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk today about the evolution of qual research and where it is heading. This is based on my conversations with some of the qual practitioners around the world and some of the users of it. Qual has been in existence for a long, long time. It has had a long history for at least as long as the field of sociology has existed. Sociology itself has roots in work of some of the Western philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, and Eastern philosophers like Confucius. The work done by psychologists like Sigmund Freud and Paul Jung have influenced the thinking on the qual research. But some people consider Paul Felix Lazarsfeld as the father of the qualitative research, so to speak. By the start of the 20th century, psychoanalysis had started to enter into the commercial world. And by mid century, Lazarsfeld had shown how psychology could provide a framework to interpret human behavior. He introduced the word to unstructured interviewing and group discussions and stressed the importance of answering the all important why question. Interestingly, the so-called pro-quantitative orthodoxy was at its peak during the 1930s and 40s, and it swept aside any non-scientific explanation of behavior. In other words, anything that didn't have any numerical data generated through empirical research and subjected to a battery of statistical analyses. Lazarsfeld, with qualifications in both mathematics and psychology, was really thinking out of the box at that point in time. And when questionnaire was the only term that was available for as a research instrument, he was hinting at using a topic guide to understand why. He started doing commercial work, by late 30s, and the research questions like how do women shop or decide where to buy clothes are the kind of things that he was exploring already. Qualitative research was beginning to get established as an alternative empirical method for identifying behavior and patterns of individuals and groups. The rest of the 20th century saw significant strides in the field. Projective techniques got introduced, interestingly, by Ernst Dichter, who himself was a pupil of Lazarsfeld. The effective dismissal of the long-running qual versus quant debate, argument within market research, and rapid expansion and proliferation of agencies specializing in it. If you look at the latest SOMAR report of 2021, it estimates the size of the qual industry to be $9 billion today, clearly suggesting that it has been a hugely successful, qual research has been hugely successful in the last 100 years or so. At the heart of it, qual research has always been about understanding human behavior, understanding people in its richness and in all its messiness. Human mind is quite muddy in the way it thinks and it navigates emotions, but qual is about mapping that complex labyrinth. It's about developing an intuition about how people behave, what do they think, and what does that thinking lead to? What kind of different behavior does that thinking lead to? That core has not changed and would probably never change, would remain unchanged always. But there has been change in the context in which it operates, and therefore the way it is used in this 21st century. Let's look at the change in qual research in the industry from four different lenses. Let's look at the client involvement or the role of the client. Let's look at the business problems and the evolution of those. Let's look at the methods, and let's look at the role of technology one by one. We start by looking at how the role of clients has changed. In other words, how do they issue briefs, and what do they expect from qual research now? At the beginning of this 21st century, the clients were demanding the thinking in terms of methodology, expecting the researcher to infuse different techniques based on the requirements. Partly driven by a bit of an anxiety of not knowing what would finally give that interesting nugget that could be used. It was partly driven by that nervousness, but more exotic the method, the ethnography, the semiotics, the better was seen to be the design and the proposal. When the fieldwork was happening, you were more likely to see people from research department or the insights functions sitting behind one-way mirror and often nervously passing slips to the moderator, ensuring that the questions that the clients need have been answered. The presentations or the outputs of qual consequently followed similar philosophy. The clients expected to see an evidence that indeed all the things that were proposed in the exotic methodologies were used, that the fieldwork was done in all the locations and all the languages that was proposed to be. So the presentations were more like a collage of output of different methodologies and locations, like country reports, for example, coming in separately, and so on and so forth. And there was an attempt in the end to combine all of this into one global summary or broader insights that the clients could use. It did have an advantage actually, because a lot of details and the nuances captured during the fieldwork were part of the reports, and people preserved those reports, and you could go back to those and pull out any interesting information or quotes or clips, etc., as and when you needed. A lot has changed on that front now, clearly. In more marketing savvy and consumer centric organizations, the insights functions have developed an identity and importance of their own. They're no longer carrier of insight, so to speak, between the agencies and the marketing, but have a seat on the decision making table to identify the way insight would be used by the business. As a result, you're very, very likely to see marketing people in the fieldwork as well, and not just nervous insights people floating around. The presentations are not a recollage of various modules, but sharp documents outlining the insights and the implications for the business. With the reduced attention spans, the appetite to sit through long presentations has vanished as well, and people expect shorter, snappier presentations, preferably in video formats. You almost have to create TikTok videos for the marketing teams, else they won't pay any attention, to what you're saying. Equally, there's a lot more pragmatism in the way the insights are used and discussed. Those are not intellectual academic discussions, but means to an end, which is the business growth. So you don't need to build a whole story and aura around how you got to the insight, but the emphasis is on being pragmatic about what it really means to the business. Give me the information that I need to make the decision and let's move on and let's save the nuances for later, is the kind of an attitude that you see a lot more today. Let's see how the business problems have changed today. The business problems that the qual research or any stream of research for that matter deals with have gone severe changes as well. There were days when the briefs were a lot more about usage and attitudes or triggers and barriers or semiotics on packaging, where the expectations were to examine just a sliver of the consumer life rather than in its entirety. As a result, the researchers were more like an ostrich, which has its head buried in the sand of the triggers and barriers or usage and attitude, and didn't examine the broader context in as much details at that point in time. The brands and businesses are obviously living in an extremely complex environment today and dealing with very, very complex issues. So increasingly, the briefs don't really care anymore whether your expertise lies in qual or quant. Briefs expect you to be an expert in solving the business problem. As a result, the briefs have evolved too and are a lot more holistic in nature than they used to be. Think of questions like where my next business growth is going to come from, where is my next $100 million growth going to come from, or how do we support African American lesbian women in the biases that they face in the world. For them, you don't know where to begin the fight and what are the prejudices that you want to challenge first. Or think of issues like vaccination, understanding vaccination hesitancy, for instance. The complexity that's driven by the role that gender, literacy, political orientation, caste, geography, etc., plays in it is quite mind-boggling. That's how complex the challenges are that businesses face today. So this, coupled with the change in the role of the client, has led to a realization that the real value of research lies in the usability of the work ultimately, the outcome that it is creating, and the tangibility of the business results. Qual has always had a huge overlap with academics, but now you can see an overlap with the business and its results too. Let's have a look at how, what are the implications on the changes in the methodology in the same time. Qual and quant used to be defined in contrast with each other for a long time, in the sense that what the other science couldn't do. Qual researcher has always been very, very consumer centric. But in the past few years, with the complexity of the briefs, coupled with the role of clients and the tech solutions availability, it has moved to be a lot more human centric. There has been a realization that nuances like memory structures, culture, human biases, etc., have a massive role to play in consumer behavior. New perspectives on the human brain, behavioral economics have come in and have become part of the mainstream. The briefs becoming complex and holistic, therefore, has gone hand in hand with the methodologies becoming more holistic as well. Qual research has always been about integrating several data points that are totally unstructured and coming from very different sources. But the data points have now multiplied vastly, and the sources can be very, very unstructured and limited only by your imagination. Social conversations, search analytics, digital ethnography, self-data captured by respondents, analytical modeling done on the subject, anything and everything that has been done before has become part of the data set that qual researchers have to deal with now. Consumer is just one feed and not the singular source of the data anymore. As a result, qual researcher is no longer an ostrich, but has become an aware and immersed being who's connected with the humans around them in every possible way, and is analyzing it continuously to understand what it means for the business. Some qual researchers now prefer to call themselves human strategists, as they now as they think that they are into solving human problems that also provide opportunities for the businesses. Focus group discussions, depth interviews, etc., are just one small component of the total universe of qual research, and they in fact may not even appear in some of the projects at all. One of the implications of that, a big implication of that, is that the skill set that the qual researchers need today has changed massively. Qual researchers have been always great at connecting the dots, structuring the unstructured data, and finding meaning in the observations. As someone described to me, qual is like a stream of river that's meandering through a landscape, and it changes the size and shape according to what it encounters, but equally gives a new meaning and depth to the landscape. I would argue that qual researchers are better equipped than anybody else to be able to create that kind of meaning with the unstructured data. They may not understand how search analytics work or how statistical modeling is done, but they have an inherent, well-tuned, well-trained, intuitive ability to look at the output of those and connect with the observations coming from other sources and come up with insights that nobody else can possibly can. And hence, qual research would never be dead. Qual research would always keep evolving and arguably would be the only stream that would survive because it's subsuming everything under it. With the change in the client role, the business problems and the methodology, qual research industry that has always had, that was always about a strong relationship with the consumer, has now become like a triangle of sorts with humans, with the real humans at the heart of it. And that is one of the fundamental significant changes. Let's look at the role of technology. I'm not going to get into the technology that was used in the previous centuries. Suffice to say that days of strapping people on chairs and giving them electric shocks are thankfully well beyond us. But at the beginning of the 21st century, tech in qual was pretty much about watching videos and listening to audio tapes, that were recorded during the fieldwork and analyzing them for insights. We've come a long way from there as well. And tech has now become an integral part for the researchers. However, interestingly, qual researchers see tech both as enablers as well as an hindrance. Let's look at the enablers first. Some of the enablers that the qual researchers think is being provided is that qual research was always incomplete if you weren't there. If you literally weren't there, you didn't get a touch and feel. Tech now enables you to be part with people anywhere in the world, anytime, physically or virtually, etc., through self measurements or through virtual connects. It makes life really seamless. From recruitments, doing the conversations and observations, recording them, and pulling out parts of other use, transcriptions, etc. Even basic level of content analysis, pulling out themes and sentiments, trends, etc., can get them through tech, allowing the researcher to focus and dig deep on more important issues. Another big benefit is that availability of big data obviously adds very different perspective and depth to the analysis. It not only provides context, but allows you to sort of filter out hypotheses in the beginning and as well as you go along the process too. It enhances the efficiency, the work efficiency massively by reducing the grunt work and being a good and doing the heavy lifting on things like information management, project management, etc. But there are barriers. There are clear hindrances as well. For example, doing group discussions virtually is emotionally exhausting. No body language, no vibes in the room. You have to over emote to get the energy going because the respondents are, also constantly multitasking. Other problem is that tech hasn't really fulfilled all its promises as yet. You can't really leave the full analysis to AI, despite all the promises that the providers have made so far. Video analytics, for example, does not exist for all practical purposes. Image analytics is about to grow mature now, thankfully. Tech companies have made tall promises without really understanding the nuances of human behavior and emotions. Researchers fall for it because they don't understand technology that much, unfortunately. The other problem also is that big data is available everywhere and you can get it, free of cost at a very low cost. But it's not often easy to figure out the profile of people who are generating that data and their context and their level, context and their lives, and what do they do and why do they behave in the way they do, etc. You have no idea about their profile. Without the depth of that profile, the data can be quite meaningless and can often be very, very totally misinterpreted. So these are some of the hindrances of the tech which we need to sort of overcome. Let's have a quick look at changes that COVID has brought in the evolution of qual and the use of technology. The reality is that 70% of the fieldwork before COVID was happening globally, virtually anyway. It just moved to 100% with COVID. Tech has come to the front and center providing tech has come to the front and center during this time, and if it wasn't providing ease, already it became a lot more easier to use technology and sort of avoid the difficulties that were there during COVID. Young researchers, particularly unfortunately because of this, have lost the art of accessing the culture and seeing real people and developing gut feel and personal touch about the subject, which is a bit unfortunate. Interestingly, it was also felt that consumers felt less vulnerable during the research in COVID, interestingly enough, and therefore they were more able to be themselves, partly because the researcher wasn't physically with them in their homes or shopping with them, etc. So they could hide their insecurities, so to speak. Equally, on the other hand, for some respondents, the lines between social media and qual research blurred because they felt as if they were creating social media content when they were participating in qual research, as if they were like social media influencers in a way. Quite interesting to see that. This required an additional layer to decipher what was real and what was projected, further increasing the complexity of the analysis. Therefore, researchers now, my sense is that when I talk to researchers, they're itching to go back to real life and do some real work. Equally, it has been good for the environment. Work-life balance has improved massively. So researchers would now, even if they go back to real life, would be a lot more selective about where they want to travel and what are the kind of things that they want to get involved in details than doing mindlessly going everywhere like they used to. So what does the future look like? No one really knows, including me, but I'm just going to extrapolate some of these recent trends that we've talked about into the future. The first one, I think, is that the generalists won't exist, but there will be a merger of sorts of all specialists like data scientists and semioticians and ethnographers. Today, they're already working as a team together in several organizations, but the awkwardness between them would reduce and the mutual appreciation of the skills would increase. Understanding of the limitation of different data sets would enhance, and that would result in the broader transferability and applications of the specialisms. Consumer insights can then truly be holistic through systemic solutions and not just by individual brilliance or fluke of chance. Tech would allow us to do some real social experiments, not in a lab-like scenario, but do small interventions in societies and observe the differences it makes in human behaviors and emotions. Think of putting a laptop in an illiterate village for a few weeks and seeing what happens. Cameras in the kitchen, giving real life feed, but of the real life feed of what's cooking in the kitchen, but with some samples, the product samples being supplied in the kitchen in that household, and so on and so forth. These social experimentations will only be limited by your imagination. AI for research would start to grow up and mature. Tech would eventually start to deliver on its promises, be it in spaces like video analytics, cultural insights, or processing big data to really understand human behavior. It would not be something that you experiment with once in a while, but it would play once in a while. So for things like modeling or forecasting, it won't be just restricted to that, but it will play a massive role in all the specialisms coming together. Consumers will learn, people will learn to monetize their own data. The trend of the self-measurement and quantification would merge with the value of the privacy and personal data. This would make people monetize the data that they capture about themselves on their own and at their own terms. Recruitment for research would therefore be a lot more expensive than it is today. It would perhaps be the most expensive component of the research and would look and feel very different from it does today. Face-to-face research arguably could be at a premium and could be renamed to something like nuance workshops or something, to sort of be able to command that premium. Finally, human intelligence would come back into vogue. Physical fieldwork done by human researchers would never die because you would always want the real nuances, but there would be a recognition all over again of the human cognitive abilities and the natural way to develop an intuition or gut feel. AI has to be trained by humans, and yes, machines do learn by themselves, but we would learn to make the technology our slaves rather than be slaves to the technology. And that would require real human ingenuity. So thank you very much. This is all I had to say. I'm happy to answer the questions and listen to your feedback and comments that you might have. Thank you.